We revoked being business partners with our boss, and it was a nightmare.
Yeah, I imagine that wouldn't go well. I think we're going to get some Sue-happy people very soon.
Yes, I imagine that would not go over well. My wife and I are in the restaurant industry. She is an incredibly talented chef and is the executive chef at the gastro pub we both work at, while I am the de facto lead cocktail waitress / server. By the way, this comes from a deleted user, and if you want to submit your own stories, go over to the r/OK Storytime subreddit and do it there. So, a little relevant background information. My wife has opened a few restaurants in our city and other cities prior to this one and has a good amount of press and professional interest. Her brand as a chef is really starting to take off, but it is in no way entirely or even mostly because of her current position. I've also been in the restaurant industry in this city and other cities, serving and bartending for years. We are restaurant lifer couple. We were the first employees of this restaurant, the only full-time employees, and we opened it with the owners along with a handful of part-time servers, bartenders, and line/prep cooks. It is a small upscale gastropub in a really vibrant neighborhood in a large coastal city. We have great guests and even better reviews. And like I mentioned above, my wife is getting more and more press and interest. When the two of us were hired, professional interest in my wife was part of the reason why the owners offered us a chance to eventually buy in and become co-owners of the gastropub and any future restaurants they owned. This was, we decided, a great opportunity for both of us. And for the first few months, we opened in early spring, things have been wonderful. Happy guests, the aforementioned great reviews. My wife has almost total autonomy in the kitchen. It has been an incredibly great work experience that made us really confident in using a huge amount of money to become partners. 3 weeks ago, we unfurled a brunch program to accompany our dinner cocktail program with the intention that I would run the floor for service along with our owner's wife, who has been a stay-at-home mom for a year or so after a couple decades of restaurant industry work. The first weekend, his wife and I worked fairly well together. I think we both anticipated some growing pains with communication, like a normal new coworker situation, but nothing negative materialized until the second weekend. His wife seemed to have a hard time relinquishing control over every single guest and table that we had.
Control freak. She thinks she's the star of this little restaurant.
You never do see that in the restaurant industry. I've never once
Control freaks?
had a control freak.
I don't know. I think
I'm being sarcastic. They're all control freaks.
Do you think you kind of need to be
that's
like?
a lie,
I feel
actually.
like
Not all of them, but most of them. And as a result, began interfering with my guests and tables instead of focusing on her own. In frustration, I lashed out in a really petty and mildly rude way. I snapped and asked if she just wanted me to gender diverse her my tables since she clearly wanted to take them all. I just snapped and asked if she wanted me to just give her my tables since she clearly wanted to take them all. She asked if she was stepping on any toes, and I told her I would appreciate being able to connect with my own guests and tables, and I felt she was interfering. She said she understood, and for the rest of the shift, in my view, we went back to being cordial and professional and had no further confrontations. And when the shift was over, I headed home without any serious further thought. When my wife came home, she had been in the restaurant kitchen when the altercation took place and comes home later than I do since she has significantly longer shifts. She told me that both the owner and his wife sat her down and read her the riot act of my apparent behavior problems and work performance issues, and that because they didn't want to upset my wife, they wanted her to talk to me about my apparent issues. My wife told them to keep her completely out of it, and any work-related issues they had with me needed to be addressed to me, as was appropriate. I should mention that prior to hearing this from my wife, virtually no work-related problems have been brought to my attention. I am generally a reliable, well-liked employee with pretty solid amounts of glowing guest reviews. I decided to head up early the next morning and discuss this one-on-one with the owner's wife. I figured this was a pretty big miscommunication with some weird missteps on both parties and wanted to have a calm and reasonable face-to-face discussion. I figured maybe the two of us just weren't quite communicating getting well, and we could figure out a way to work together and ultimately be in business together that would benefit both of us. So I met with her before work with the anticipation also of apologizing for being totally petty with my comment the weekend before. Reddit, this was the most absurd and pointless conversation I have ever had in my adult professional life. I opened the conversation explaining that I was upset and was trying to be diplomatic, but was having a hard time navigating our situation, and I felt it was inappropriate for her and her husband to discuss issues of mine with my wife. That was the longest sentence I managed to get out before her index finger went up and the voice started raising.
I hate the index finger. Excuse me, can you just shut up?
Actually, I have some things to say.
And it's very much important, and way more important whatever you were gonna say, so
Zip it. Be outstanding. Call her ugly.
Okay, I'm not gonna do that.
Be different.
Be different, but I do
Should
feel
be
like you have to say, like, I feel like if you just said, what's your favorite movie? Like people would be like, eh.
I was told I had bad vibes, I was rude, and around customers I had a bad attitude towards her and by extensions the guests and our restaurant. I was informed repeatedly that she was from New York and she just always talked like this. She didn't know what I wanted or needed out of trying to have a conversation with her. It was pretty heavily implied that I'm her subordinate, which I suppose technically I am and always will be. It was pretty condescending and defeatist. She ended up abruptly walking out of the conversation and I ended up crying in public, which was mortifying. She ended up walking up to my wife, who was back in the restaurant kitchen, and apologizing to her for all the drama and asked my wife how old I was. I'll say this for my wife. She's not an enabler. She's supportive, but if she thinks I'm being unreasonable or over the top, or generally seeing a situation inaccurate way, she will not hesitate to tell me. We were both really appalled with how this had been handled, and we've both decided after days of talking that it's pretty clear we aren't willing to go into business with this couple. We have some really fundamentally different ways of communicating and dealing with guests and service, and my wife and I aren't willing to deal with their communication style. We've decided to move on in December, probably head back to Vegas, aka the Mecca of food.
Is that
where we live?
Is that
prior to this
accurate?
city.
Vegas. I mean, Vegas is known for great food because it has like the crazy hotels and stuff.
I'll tell
In
you why.
America,
Is
maybe.
it the Mecca of
I'll
food
tell you why.
though?
I'll tell you
the
why.
Mecca of food is
Are you ready
crazy.
for this? Mecca of food's crazy, but I'll tell you why it's called like that.
Why?
Buffets. It has the most buffets, but the buffets are crazy. They're like
Well, I don't
5-star
feel
buffets.
like it's the buffets. I feel like it's like a lot of really high-end chefs open restaurants in Vegas in these big, gaudy monstrosity hotels.
I mean,
Like
yeah,
I know
that
Gordon
too.
Ramsay has a lot of restaurants down there.
But I
That's
will, say,
really
yeah,
it.
I will say the Mecca of food,
What?
New York City.
Yeah, I was going to say. However, my owner, not his wife, sent me a text saying the two of us, the owner and me, need to have a discussion about the whole situation. He's already assured my wife that I'm a good server and not getting fired. Cue the eye roll. But at this point, I'm really not sure how to proceed or what to talk to him about, or if I should agree to meet at all. At this point, my wife and I are just removing ourselves mentally from the business, treating it like any other job, and moving on in 4 months. Neither of us are willing to stay, and we're both confident and happy with our decision. If anyone is still here after that mountain of text, my question is, how do we navigate this situation? What do I say in my meeting with my owner? And I am a fairly clever and aloof person, so I have no problem either playing dumb or being a yes man or vehemently defending myself, although I'm leaning towards the former because I'm already emotionally and mentally moved on. What is the best way to handle this? And there are some comments. Sam, how would you handle this if you had to handle it?
I mean, you don't want to like F anyone over, right? But you also don't want to be in a relationship that is actively just destroying your happiness, and also might not lead to any like financial success either. If it's
Right.
if there's this much distraughtness already. So
Yeah.
I would try to leave elegantly without screwing everyone over.
Comment number 1, meet with him and see what he has to say. He is the boss, and if you plan to continue working there, he might know his wife is crazy and offer you an olive branch, or maybe he'll confirm that his wife is your superior and you need to check the attitude. attitude. OP says, all good points. Thanks for your response. I think if he confirms she is my superior, that would reiterate we're doing the right thing moving on. He likely thinks we're still on board to give him tens of thousands of dollars to buy parts of his business. Kind of a win-win, lose-lose situation. The reply says, it sounds to me like he's considering your wife a future business partner and you a side effect. Probably a smart move to go somewhere else. That being said, it can't hurt to hear what you have to say, and finding out his wife's antics cost him his investors, his star chef, and front of house will be a major ego check. OP says this is exactly how it feels, which, I mean, of course, his star chef is the golden child. I'm all about that. She's fantastic. But yes, I think he needs a bit of a wake-up call, although in order to keep the peace for the duration, my wife and I would prefer to have a pretty brutally honest exit interview, sort of a situation when we put our notice in, rather than me getting defensive and word vomiting about these problems when I meet him tomorrow. I agree with that. If your plan is to leave, that's what you should lead with. You should lead with the fact that you're out. Thanks for all of the responses. Reddit is a lot of fun. I should involve myself more. And there is a second comment here. I hate it when people try to justify acting crappy because they're from somewhere. Just because you're from New York City doesn't mean it's acceptable to be rude to people or to be able to talk to people in unpleasant ways. And we have the update. Hello all. I have to say, I really am blown away by the diplomacy and sympathy I received with my first post. I really thought this was a pretty mild topic that wouldn't receive too much attention, so I'm really grateful for everyone that took the time to comment. Seriously, once I hit 7 upvotes and 4 comments, I thought that was going to be the end. I want to clarify and expand on a few details before I dive into the update. First, I have absolutely no ego about my job. I'm a freaking waitress. I'm completely aware it's unskilled labor and certainly doesn't take any specific skill set to be competent at it, which I disagree with that, but
Talking to people and making them feel like welcome and loved is one of the hardest and also best things that you can learn.
You're essentially public speaking to a very small group of
You're
audience
curating
members.
a vibe.
Constantly all day.
Yeah. The
Which
only
not
job
everyone
in the
can be good
future
at
will be
that.
curating vibes.
In fact, if you've ever been to a restaurant, you'll know there are people who at it.
A lot of people.
So that said, I love my job. I served and bartended through 2 college degrees and kept on going afterwards. I have a blast at work, but I am absolutely aware that my wife is a significantly more valuable employee. And were this a simple employment situation, I would happily just move to a new job. I also wanted to clarify on the owner's wife's interference when I snapped at her. She wasn't simply checking on tables and refilling water and pre-bussing tables. At one point, she was standing at one of my tables for 3 to 4 minutes, which is a long booty time in the restaurant world, talking about her 4 kids and which ones still breastfeed and her mortgage and how much she would lose if the business failed and the application
She's
process.
talking about
my wife
the
went through.
business failing at the tables.
This is nuts. You don't do that. That's classic.
I mean, I've
worked
never
with a
waited
guy-
tables, but I imagine that would not have tips
buddy.
go too well.
It was incredibly inappropriate and a really invasive service style. I usually don't even let my own guests know I'm married to the chef unless it organically comes up in conversation. Multiple tables were actively complaining to me about her service style, which led to the admittedly petty comment I made to her. Anyway, I went in to meet the owner. I asked our bar manager to be present at the meeting as well. Bar manager is a longtime friend of the owner and was present for the initial altercation and the private conversation the owner's wife and I had. So the 3 of us chatted for about 5 minutes. I said very little and mostly took the general advice here of deferring to whatever my boss said. I generally employed 3 key phrases: I understand, you're absolutely right, and I'm sorry. My bar manager, with whom I primarily work with rather than the owner, completely shut down any tense moments by immediately telling the owner that I was a self-assured, seasoned server who needed little to no direction, and that the owner's wife overstepped her boundaries in a big way, which led to a pretty undesirable reaction from me. The owner pretty much deflated after that. He hemmed and hawed a bit about me being inappropriate, to which I agreed, and then repeatedly told me his wife had no problem with me. I cheerfully answered, "Great, I look forward to working with her next shift," and that essentially ended the conversation. I did ask the owner point blank if his wife was considered my superior when we worked together. He looked confused and clarified that no, she was considered my complete equal, both on the floor and off. He also firmly stuck to his belief in being justified in discussing my personnel performance issues with my wife, a statement to which I again deferred. Big, absolutely. Hey, that is honestly the best way in an environment like that, where you already know you're out. You just go, "Hey, yeah, that's okay." No, I agree. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because like the only thing that you gain is just pain by disagreeing with any of this.
Yeah, and
The
if you already know you're not staying, then
Yeah.
then
Just give in.
just hey. So that was the planned end of my update until a pretty serious conversation with my wife last night. Prior to and aside from this altercation, there have been some instances that my wife witnessed that really made her question if we should invest with them. Apparently, our owner has been getting hammered during his shifts. He
Oh
works
my
alone
God.
behind the bar a few days early in the week, whereas I work the later weekdays and the weekend. He has been so hammered to the point where he has fallen over in front of guests behind the bar and completely been unable to make cocktails. We are an upscale craft cocktail bar and been visibly intoxicated with heavy slurring, generally giving terrible, wasted service.
Maybe he's just taking a shot with everyone. He's like, you know what? If you take a shot, I'll take a shot.
Hey, you know that what they say, one for you, one for me.
Maybe two for me.
Two. You know what they say, I have a problem. The breaking point for my wife was 2 one-star Yelp reviews within minutes of each other, specifically calling out his service. One guest had to actually go to the kitchen window to get her own food. It's terrible. I was completely appalled and upset for and with her, and we both agreed this is not the way we want to run a business and reiterated to each other that any potential partnership with this couple wasn't going to happen. We are both professionally serious people, both committed to her career goal, and neither of us will do anything to jeopardize that. And by the way, your ears will be in jeopardy of not hearing more stories
Just like
like
one.
this in full episodes of our podcast that you can find on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and wherever you get podcasts from. Just search OK Storytime.
Do it.
Anyway, we are both on the same page now. We're keeping our savings intact and completely mentally/emotionally checked out of going into business with this couple and generally getting all of our ducks in a row to head back to Vegas so she can get back into some of those top tier restaurants. Our lease is up in November, so we'll just ride it out until then. Reddit, I really appreciate the attention this query received. It really felt a bit unmoored with how to handle it, and I'm glad that you all essentially told me to follow my instincts and play it safe, close to the vest. That's it. Thanks, everyone. And that's it,
And
folks.
that's a wrap.
the end.
So
Play it
if
close
you're
to the
going to go
vest.
into business with someone,
Play it close to the vest.
or I actually have advice on this one.
Let's go, Sam.
All
Sam,
right.
businessman.
You are going to start a business, and like I feel like they should have done like a pop-up beforehand, or
Well, they weren't partnered yet. They were just some of the first in play. We're going to partner.
I just feel like they should have tested things like in a
You know, this-
smaller way, like
sounds
maybe
like
like
a-
a week in and see like, hey, let's do a week stint and see how it is instead of committing like or somewhat committing off the bat.
It sounds like they got committed for the wife. This guy is definitely, I mean, probably not anticipating losing his head chef, but if you're scaring customers at the bar,
You're probably not going to be
not a
around
good
long.
owner. You're a bad owner if you're scaring your own customers at the bar.
But if they ask more questions, maybe you could give context, but get out of there first.
Yeah.